All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Making the Argument. I'm your host, Nick Freitas, and today we have a very special guest, Magatte Wade. And I want to tell you how she first popped up on my radar. I was watching her speak on a topic, and the way she was speaking about it is so controversial, especially in certain academic circles. But the more she went into details in her own experience, the more all of it just made absolute sense when she was essentially saying that the problem facing entrepreneurship and wealth generation and prosperity in Africa is not colonialism. It's not exploitation. It's not a lot of the other things that we commonly hear. In fact, it's not even corruption in the traditional sense that we think of it, but rather a system which systematically harms and obstructs entrepreneurs from being able to go out there, produce goods and services, work with people in voluntary cooperation to meet their needs. And this is something she knows a lot about from personal experience, being a successful entrepreneur, but also fighting back against some of the common narratives that we see that seeks to explain all of the problems, not just going on in Africa, but in all places around the world right now. And so I found the interviews that she has done with people like Jordan Peterson to be truly fascinating, and is an absolute honor to have her on here today. So Magatte, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Likewise, it's a pleasure.
So tell us a little bit, just give our audience a little bit, kind of a quick introduction to you and the work that you're currently doing, both from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but also from an economic, and I don't know if you'd use the word activist, but certainly an advocate.
Yeah. No, I actually, I very consciously call myself a prosperity activist, right? Because most activists are out there, only God knows, I call myself a prosperity activist. So on a nutshell, yes, so my name is Magatte Wade. I was born in Senegal, the west coast of Africa, grew up in Germany and France. So I was raised primarily in France, educated there. And after business school in France, I decided that France would be too small for my ambitions, and I decided to move to the US from there. And so really, just so we can keep things in a nutshell, and I'm sure we can unravel and unpack stuff as we go through the conversation, and I try not to just go on this long rambling. But the best way to describe me is I am, yes, an entrepreneur. I like to practice and to preach. So I'm an entrepreneur. That's my practicing journey of what I preach. And what is it that I preach? I preach for free markets. I preach free market capitalism because I think many people don't understand that entrepreneurship does not happen in a vacuum, right? And just like the same way, many people tend to forget the air that surrounds us. It's this invisible thing, but without it, you and I can't exist. And so that's what the free markets in a way are to entrepreneurship. And so it's really important for people to also take that into account when they think about, how everything works. So I'm a practitioner, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a preacher, free market capitalism advocate. And on my entrepreneurial journey, what I do is I have built, so far I'm building my third company, which is all my companies are, consumer brands that have embedded in their DNA the very best of my African culture and heritage. And this is one of our products. So we have skincare products. It's just my latest company is a skincare company called Skin is Skin, manufactured 100% in Africa, in Senegal, and sold primarily here in the US. You can find us as Whole Foods and places like that. But when it comes to an entrepreneur, people are freaked out by me because basically I build anywhere from these beauty brands to, I should actually say, my really latest venture is the creation of cities. So we call them startup cities. I'm sure we'll go into it. But yes, so that's the range of my entrepreneurship journey, from beauty products to building entire new cities in Africa.
Well, and so you grew up in France and in Germany, and I've heard you talk about this before, and I think you also mentioned it, aspects of it in your book as well. You didn't like this passion that you currently have now for entrepreneurship or free market capitalism. That was not the beginning of your journey. So what did you used to think, either about free markets, or what did you used to think about the circumstances which maybe created poverty and the best mechanisms for alleviating that poverty? How did your intellectual journey start, and what was kind of that transition moment when you really felt yourself shifting to a different way of thinking about it?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a very good question. So basically, like I said, I was born in Senegal. And then what people need to understand is right around age 2, after I was done breastfeeding, my parents made the very difficult journey that so many African parents before them have made. And so many African parents since them continue to make to this day. And what was that decision? It was to actually pack up without me and leave our home, leave our village, leave our country, leave our continent, to go to Europe. And in this case, what were they leaving for or towards to? They were leaving towards a better life for me that they had left back home. They basically were economic migrants. My parents left home so that they could go to Europe in search of a job, so that they can take care of me, and the rest of the families stayed back home. Very simple. So, and the reason why they didn't want to take me with them is because, as we all know, nobody wants to drag their kids on an uncertain journey, right? Because it's a very uncertain journey. And so, but a few years later, when it became clear that theirs had worked, then they called for me to be reunited with them, which also meant me being now separated from the only caretaker that I knew by then, which was my grandmother. So another traumatic event we don't think about the people who, in a way, I'm the biggest beneficiary of that journey, but I also lost a lot, right? It depends on what you count for. But in this case, my relationship with my grandma, gone. And so anyway, arrived in Germany in the middle of the winter, and then I look around, and the only question that could come to my little 7-year-old brain was, how come these people have this and we don't? And literally all I was talking about was, how come these people, me back home, when my grandma says, Magatte, it's time for you to take a shower. And I'm like, yes, grandma, because maybe I just came back from playing or whatever. But between the moment she says that and I say yes, and the moment the water actually touches my skin, a good 45 minutes to an hour is going to go by. Why? Not because I went back to play, but because grandma has to get a charcoal stove going, literally. Like, when you go camping, that little stove you have where you stuff, the coals in it. That's what you had to do. And fan it, as you know, it takes time. And then when the coals are hot red, she puts a pot of hot water on there, waits for it to boil. And then once it's boiled, she transfers it over to a bigger bucket, mixes it with some cold water so it's temperature safe for me. And then somebody stronger in the family drags this bucket, because it's big buckets, right? Drags it to the shower area. And there at last, with a smaller plastic, pot, I can finally proceed to have my shower. And here in Germany, mom is like, my God, it's time for shower. I'm like, where's the bucket of water? And she's like, come on, you're silly. Just jump in the shower. And then I jump, turn the buttons, the water's coming down, the temperature that you needed. And I was just like, whoa. It was literally like, whoa.
Yeah.
What just, and then it was not just a shower. It was also these stores with all of these beautiful goods, the amount of different breads, where us back home, there's only one type of bread or two types of breads. And here it's like an hour worth of breads and all of these beautiful, goods are aligned on the shelves. It's all beautiful. And the store is, has AC in the summer, or, heat in the winter. Always clean, it was just like, wow. And the paved road. And I was looking at it and I was like, oh my God. And then I was just like, yeah, how come they have this and we don't? And then that question really became an obsession. Some kids can really have obsessions. And that was my obsession, because I could not reconcile these two situations. And eventually, and so the question it stayed with me. And eventually it went from, how come they have this and we don't, to how come some countries like mine are poor and countries like the US, Australia, New Zealand are rich? Why? What's going on?
Let me ask you a question on that, because it's fascinating to me in the United States, especially within academia, and I think this is probably true of academic institutions in many places in the West, where you do have a great deal more prosperity than in certain parts of the world. Their answer to that is exploitation. The narrative is that these Western empires, these Western countries went to other places, engaged in colonialism, exploitation of natural resources, and that explains the wealth. And again, from a historical perspective, you can certainly look at aspects of colonialism and see the exploitive nature of it, and in some places more than others. But there's no question there was some of that. But the idea that that explains the wealth or the disparities doesn't seem to add up. But my question is did that seem like a legitimate explanation to you at some stage, or were you always skeptical of that explanation?
It was not that I was. So the way it worked was, of course, as I was looking for an answer to that question, and you have to remember, that question popped in my head at 7, never left me until I got my answer. And once I got my answer, I got into working on it, on then, if this is a diagnosis, what's the solution? So little girl, 7 years old, wants to know, and she's looking for cues in the word as to what is the answer to this question. And I hear different people, and by now, the best way I could describe, the people and the answers that they would provide is, by now you can put them into 2 different categories. On one side, you have what I would call your typical Africans, the typical Africans and their so-called allies. And them, you can line up 100 of them on this side, and you can line up 100 non-Africans on this side, and people who, quite frankly, maybe don't care at all, you line them up on this side. So on the side of Africans and their so-called allies, you have usual suspects that come up in terms of what's the reason of Africa's poverty. There, the usual suspects are going to be slavery, colonialism, racism, the stealing of natural resources, this type of answers. When you look at the side of the non-Africans and people who in general would say also, and why do I care about Africa? There, what you're going to hear is they're lazy, low IQ, they're always fighting each other, and so there you have it. Except that, and from both camps though will bring up corrupt leaders, corruption in general, and that's what both camps would also agree on. But I sit there, and at first I believed it. Because the colonialism happened, and also the natural resources, they just are taking this stuff away from us. Of course, that's what made them rich and keeps us poor. It's this very zero-sum game world way of looking at the world. At first, that's what I believed when I was just not well educated about any of this stuff. But then I'm starting to think, even when it comes to the colonialism part, I'm thinking to myself, if colonialism was actually the reason why, then how do you explain to me nations like Singapore that have managed, who were as poor, if not more poor than most African nations during the times most of us were getting our independence in the late 50s, early 60s. Singapore, same level, if not poorer than many of us. Singapore has managed in 60 plus years to basically go from being a poor nation that was colonized to now being richer per GDP capita than its colonizer, Great Britain. How do you explain that? And conversely, and in the same vein, how do you explain a nation like Ethiopia that never has been colonized in Africa? Never has been colonized. And Ethiopia is also among the poor nations of the world. As a matter of fact, for the longest time, Ethiopia was the poster child of poverty in Africa. You're showing this kid super poor, super like nothing on the bones, like bare bones almost, and basically waiting to die with flies around his eyes and all of that stuff. So if that was the case, how do you explain these situations to me? How? That did not add up. And when they said, there were people saying low IQ, the lazy, whatever. So then if that was true, if you guys were true on that, how come my parents, the same people that you deemed stupid, lazy, the minute they leave this place, all of a sudden they can self-actualize. Yeah. The same people we're talking about, same name, we talk about the same exact person. So, and That doesn't add up either. So you see, a lot of these reasons did not add up. And of course, I've heard the most silly of them all, which is, oh, you're poor because you don't have access to shoes. So let us give you some shoes, as if that can change anything.
Yeah.
And so none of it made sense, Nick. And so you can imagine that I was just like, there's got to be something else. But then when I was like thinking about my parents and people like them, as soon as they leave their country, they can self-actualize. There was already starting to a kernel of truth was starting to come out, because there I'm looking at that equation and thinking the only variable in this equation is the place that these people get to be in or not. So now I'm thinking it has to do with the place. What's going on with these places?
So that's okay. So that's fascinating because again, you're right. There are so many people that it's almost as if they are looking for whatever explanation feeds their preconceived notion or their political ideology or whatnot. And you seem to have really gone through this comprehensive process of, well, wait a second. If it's all about colonialism, then again, why is Singapore wealthy? If it's all about this other factor, well, then why is it that if I take this same person out of an impoverished country and I put them in a wealthy country, it's not as if they're doing fine. No, they excel. They excel. They're in so many cases so much better at taking advantage of the economic opportunities or whatnot that might present themselves in a country than even the native population half the time.
That's right.
And so here's my question. Was there a particular moment for you, whether it was understanding that, yeah, the colonialism thing just doesn't add up, or whether it was this whole trope about just being lazy or not having access, now that doesn't add up. Were there any like specific moments where you can remember, or was it more gradual over time?
I think it was more gradual over time. Like I said, at first I believed it because if you just think about things on the surface, yeah, it looks plausible. It looks plausible. But the problem is, like when I say when you go beyond being a lazy thinker, because I call that type of thinking lazy thinking. When you don't take a thinking all the way down to the deep roots, you're staying at the lazy thinker level. So if you say at the lazy thinker level, or just you're not digging deeper, you might think it might make sense, especially when also you have to understand, Nick, we are surrounded by media, academia, and Hollywood. To me, are the strongest influencers of all throughout time, right? As they appeared, Hollywood was not always here. But bottom line is, Hollywood, academia, and media are such strong influencers, and we all know the type of rhetoric that they push for. And so when on top of that, it seems like the common understanding and the accepted understanding among those are the fact that supposedly colonialism is what made Africa poor today. Then of course you have nothing pushing back on what you're hearing. So what I'm saying is, it's so easy to be stuck at that level and take it for granted that it is the case. I mean, come and think about it. Even Avatar, a movie that seems as innocent as Avatar, what is it telling you?
Mm-hmm.
Bad, multinationals, usually coming from the West, go to these little indigenous places where, by the way, the indigenous people are just all nice and, nice, innocent people, supposedly, whatever. And then they come and they grab everything and they destroy everything and blah, blah, blah. You see, we're being conditioned. So what I'm saying is, that's why it was not any one single thing, but it was gradually and especially starting to have access to other things that helped me. I guess a question to your answer is something that I talk about in my book. I think for me, so at first I took it for granted. Yeah, it's true, it's colonialism. I could not buy the IQ thing, but all of this other stuff seemed like yeah. And then I started a business in California, and all my businesses very much have an aspect of sustainability in them. I'm a firm believer. That's why I used to be on the board for Conscious Capitalism. We're all about purpose maximization and not necessarily profit maximizations. But it's been proven that when you go for purpose maximization, you actually tend to do better than your conventional competitors. So it's good business to actually do good. Mm. In any case, this is when I got with that first company called Adina. I talk about it in the book. People could really, it was a real saga. But anyway, I was surrounded by people who are in the green world. the green world means is all of this stuff for sustainability, whether it's organic, natural, you name it. And we had an argument with my business partner, went through a proxy battle. And during the proxy battle, just these are people, for the most part, who you would say are very much on the liberal side, for the most part. I was in San Francisco, very surrounded by that whole ideology of leftism. I took it for granted that Republicans were de facto bad people, racist people, mean people, but did not like Black people, and they are not safe for me. I took it for granted that, when Biden said to the people that, have, what do you call it, the Breakfast Club, if you ain't voting for me, you ain't Black, or something like that. If you imagine that, I'm sure you remember how we said it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
bottom line is, if you're Black, you must vote Democrat. And I really felt that way back in the days. So I was surrounded by that echo chamber. And it's funny because, so for me, I thought they were the good guys. And so I thought they were the good guys. So, but when we had this proxy battle, then I start to realize, and I went for it. I won the proxy battle by the teeth of my skin, but I won it, darn it. But the process and what I saw coming out of that network of people who call themselves so elevated because they're so enlightened. You understand? They're the ones who care about animal rights and human rights and social rights and women's rights and Black people's rights and all the minorities' rights. What I have seen them do and the way I've seen them behave during that time showed me that for a lot of it, it was all a facade. So right there, when the masks came down, with the mask, everything else came down. So it was time for me to reconsider everything. All I was seeing, bottom line is, I was seeing hypocrisy all over. And so that actually was, if I could pinpoint a really pivotal moment of my life in terms of going from being on the left of the left, and I would say it again, borderline commie, to today being a fierce free market, advocate. That was a pivotal moment of my journey, and people can read more about it in the book and how it really all played out. It was just you could not have had a metamorphosis if you were a normally constituted person, if you went through what I went through during that time. These people proved to me that they were nothing of what they were claiming to be, and that's when in my bones, for the first time, I realized what virtue signaling is all about. Before, people were using the words virtue signaling.
And as we talk about entrepreneurship, we would be remiss if we did not mention some of our favorite entrepreneurs over at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com, put in promo code Nick. Here's what you're going to get right now, right? You're going to sign up for one of their subscriptions. You're going to get 10% off. You're going to get free shipping, and you're going to get what they refer to as their price shield. What is this? This is your own individual guard against whatever stupid things the federal government is going to do with respect to inflation over the next couple of years. So you sign up for your subscription right now to some of the best American-raised beef, pork, poultry, or wild-caught seafood. And that subscription, that price you lock in today is going to be good all the way to 2026. That is incredibly hard to beat. No, it's impossible to beat. So go to goodranchers.com, use promo code Nick, get that deal today. All right, let's get back to it. Yeah. No, and the book's called Heart of a Cheetah, and we definitely encourage all of our audience to check that out. There is a statement I heard you make once in an interview, and I think it kind of goes to this experience that you had where you were saying it's easy to have a heart for the poor, but it's I think tell me the same, because you're going to say it better than I am.
Yeah. My friend Michael Fairbanks is the one who coined the word in this documentary we were in together, and I use it all the time because it's so true. Having a mind for the poor, that's easy.
Or having a heart
having a heart for the poor, that's easy. Having a mind for the poor, that's the challenge. And it's very true. It's very true. So then this part takes you back to when I realized that racism, colonialism, slavery, usual suspect as reasons as to why we're poor today did not make sense. Laziness, low IQ, all of that stuff didn't make sense either. And I kept on searching. And as life as fate would have it, I after business school in France, I moved to the US and I became a headhunter in the finance world, primarily, finding talent for companies like Google and Netflix before they became household name brands. I mean, Netflix was a tiny little office in the middle of nowhere, San Jose. That's how early we were. In any case, this was a time of my life I was doing extremely well for myself and talking about the American dream. Little immigrant Magatte coming out of nowhere now here gets to buy this beautiful home with a pool in one of the most expensive zip codes in America, and she's not even 25 years old yet. It's rather amazing, isn't it? And so I was doing it. So just to tell you how well I was doing, because then it will explain everything else. So as it would happen to me on a regular basis, this one day I was driving down Highway 1 towards, heading towards Big Sur. I was actually within the Big Sur area. And it was a happy moment, as I would have oftentimes happy moment, because, how could you not be happy when you feel when you give into gratitude, the gratitude of everything that life has afforded you, everything that God has given you, right? So this was one of those moments driving down Highway 1, Big Sur being so gorgeous and so full of glory. It was a glorious morning and, glorious day. And so here I am thinking about how far I've come and how far Grandma must be, because she was gone by then. How far Grandma must be, her who would always tell everybody, I could see the stars, I could see the universe in your eyes. She was and she always told everybody, that I would be this big thing one day. And only her believed it, but I believed it too, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, so it was one of those moments and thinking and feeling so much gratitude for God, feeling so much gratitude for all the people that he exercised this grace through, meaning all the people who showed up in my life, to help me, because I don't believe you do anything alone in this world. So everybody who has showed up and has just, helped, make it happen. But at that moment, just a deep moment of darkness would come. I was used to that feeling. I was used to that sequence of events. This has been my life. Being very excited and gratitude getting to me, and then dark moment flip in my head and everything goes dark. What it is the fact that, when you have been afforded as much as I have been afforded, the abundance that I have been afforded, and you think about the life of scarcity that you have left behind, and that is still very much, actuality. At some point, if you are not completely disconnected from your fellow man as an human, then you can't just go on, right? Some point you gotta be, So, but usually what I would do is when that grief would take over, because there's no other way to call it, grief, pain, it's just this, I would just throw it under the rug and say, come on, this problem has come before you and will probably be here well after you. And what is this problem? This problem literally has people's faces in my brain, in my eyes. And what is it? It's people who are trying to leave home, packing themselves into little fishermen's boats, trying to cross over to Europe in order to get a job. Yet the boat tips over, and you have thousands of young people, for the most part young people, laying right now at the bottom of the ocean serving as fish food. It is the most heart-wrenching story that you can know of. And these are not just stories for me. These are friends of friends, distant family members. These are real people to me. If not, people decide to hide in the landing gear of a plane, such that somewhere above England, a body will drop, or hide in the cargo section of a plane. And so when you open it, on the other side, there's a dead, frozen body in there because no one told them, but up there, things get really cold and you die. And when they decide that those routes are too dangerous, then they go land land route means, for the most part, they're going to be stuck in Libya. And there, they get sold. They get sold as slaves today in 2024 as slaves. My price is between $300 and $500 to be precise. And so these are the stories that haunt me, because that's the other thing. I'm haunted as it is. These are the stories that haunt me, that contribute to me being haunted. And so you can just imagine when those demons come up, you just try to find a way to get rid of them, because it's too much. It's too much, especially this type of demon that this reality is. What do you do with this? What do you do with this? What do you do when you're 20, barely 20, you're not even 25 years old yet, and you're looking at this state of the world and you're like, what do I do about this? You're talking about an entire continent. What can I, Magatte, do about this crap? It's quite overwhelming, isn't it? And so for the longest time, I would get myself to a place of where I just try to accept that there's nothing I can do about this. It's too big. It's way bigger than me. And then I would eventually it would go away. And then I can carry on with my journey. But that day, it did not happen that way. Something happened that said, no, we're not going to allow you to shrug this under the rug. And I was telling somebody the other day, the mind has an infinite ability to make sense of pretty much anything, including of the worst. That's how, you get the Nazis to find whatever crap they have done. All the, people do horrible things and always find ways to justify them. We're always telling ourselves a story. But the body, they say, doesn't have that ability. And I think that day, my mind split from my body. And instead of my body, I would prefer to even call it maybe my soul. Maybe that's the soul that we really need. And that day, mind were no longer mind and soul. Soul said, mind, you're on your own. You keep foot. But us, we can't go on like this anymore. This has to be addressed. And such that my body literally jerked. And I could have had this very bad accident, probably the end for me. But God didn't decide it that way. And I parked as soon as I could park, got out of the car, got on my knees, and that was it. I made my little deal with God. I said, from here on, I promise, I'm going to focus on Africa. Every breath that you're going to be willing to grant me, it's going to go towards the service of Africa. And I don't know what to do, though, but I'm showing up. You show me the way. And eventually things started to happen, I went back home to Senegal a few months after that to show my husband of then, Emmanuel. He was a Frenchman, passed away since then, but showed Emmanuel where I came from and all of that. And, the hibiscus, especially the hibiscus drink that I've been telling him about the whole time. He was a foodie, so he definitely wanted to see more of that. Like, he would say, I want to have a real version, because, there's a version I was giving him at home, but then it's like, convinced there's probably a real authentic way, like my grandma way. Anyway, so we discovered that, back then, if you made it, the way people show status is by drinking, soda pop brands from the West, Pepsi, Fanta, Coca-Cola, products like that. And so while the elite were going for those soda pop brands, Western brands, the bottom of the pyramid was going for the knockoff brands of those Western brands. And in between, you have squeezed out the indigenous beverages that we were drinking, in this case, the hibiscus drink. And in doing that also, the women who used to grow the hibiscus now also are losing their livelihood because no one is drinking this anymore. And so this cycle of poverty, it just keeps on growing. And that really sent me for dead. I was overwhelmed with disappointment in my people, anger at how the world worked, pretty much everything. And I was shut down for 3 days. For 3 days, my body was just like, nope, I'm not getting up. I don't want to eat. I don't want to drink. I'm on strike. And my husband's like, this is so ridiculous. He's like, Magatte, I understand your anger, but anger is energy, except it's negative energy. Can you find it in you to turn this around where it becomes inspiration, meaning positive energy? And so as he was saying that, I also was, getting back to deep teachings that I had received from my family, which has to do with this concept of criticize by creating. I was never allowed to go to my parents with, you know, a criticism alone. The only way I'm allowed to criticize is if I'm also coming with a solution. It doesn't have to be the right alternative that I'm proposing, but I was told when you're in solutions mode, you're in a very different mindset. And I think all it is when you're in solutions mode, you regain your self-agency. That's all it is. And that's the only place from where a solution can be born, right?
So,
and so,
well, let me ask you this, because I first of all, I love that saying, that, you know, criticize through creation. But there's so many people that have, let's say, been similarly frustrated, angered even. And their response is that, well, the government's got to do something. And so to the extent that they decide to come up with a solution, the solution is always political activism. The solution is always government intervention. The solution is foreign aid. The solution is struggle sessions, land acknowledgements. It's all of this other stuff. Why was the solution that you embarked on so different from what so many other people embark on when they realize that same frustration?
Yeah. In my case, perhaps it has to do with the fact that I come from a tradition that's very different from many people. You see, I'm a Sufi I'm a Sufi. So where I come from in our traditional culture, I come from a traditional culture that says, work as if you will never die and pray as if you will die tomorrow. That's the culture that I was pretty much born with. This is our mantra. And you have to understand that our traditional, the person who founded our brotherhood, basically before Gandhi, before Dr. King, was a principled nonviolence activist that most of the world doesn't know of. And so when we were going through colonization, this is a man who has fought against the French without having one drop of blood spilled. So by tradition, we don't trust and believe. We don't trust government. We never trusted the state. So we do everything ourselves. So maybe for me, that's a bit of the background that could explain that and help with that. But then let me walk you through why I went for the solution that I went for, because this is why it's important in life to have a right diagnosis to your problems. And again, not be a lazy thinker. Don't stop thinking at the level where it suits you. Don't stop just saying, okay, I think it got me to a point where I'm thinking that if I do X, then it gets me Y. Done. Never thinking devil's advocate. How could this idea be corrupt by somebody else, or how could it be circumvented? You don't think about. I mean, most people don't think about that. But that's the only way to see if your solution is going to be viable. Businesses have to do it all the time. When you come up with a solution, when you come up with an idea, you don't just be like, oh, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. You put it through what we call a stress test, right? You have this brain trust around you, and people, their job is to push as hard as they can against the idea. And if it can sustain all of that stress, then you know that you might have a good idea. But otherwise, people will be sitting there and telling you all the ways in which your idea might be getting corrupt. It might be a good idea, but it will be corrupt in this way, or these are the limits of the idea, or this is how it could turn into, this is how somebody else can take it to advantage against you at some point. All of that stuff, you go through it. Why? Because if you don't, your business is not in there anymore the next minute. So anyway, so I go back to here. So when that happened, I made my deal with God. I got to Senegal, see that the hibiscus, blah, blah, blah. Father said, criticize by creating. So I'm thinking criticize by creating. Okay, that's great. At that point, that's when I got up. I'm like, yeah, that's right. I'm going to criticize by creating. What does it mean? It means I'm going to create a brand, and we're going to make it so cool in the US. I'm going to do reverse colonialism on my own people. And because they're going to hear that, oh my God, we're sharing that this cool brand, this cool product that the cool Westerners are drinking is Adina. So we should be drinking it too. So you see, Western, reverse colonialism. Whatever is good for West is good for me. That's how we're thinking. So what I'm going to do it that way, and that's how we're going to bring it back home. And that's exactly kind of what we did. And in any case, but you know what, Nick, in creating that company, by the time the UNDP did a case study on us, because they were just like, wow, because you have to realize back then, I was the only, to my knowledge, company created by an African that has raised as much money as we did. By the time we're done, we had raised more than $32 million of funding, and national distribution, Whole Foods, Wegmans, you name it, all over the place. I think we were the only African brand started by an African that had such, national success at all levels. And so I had friends of mine, Africans, who were laughing at me saying, oh, you with your fancy education, you're going to go do what? Sell flower juice? I'm like, you laugh all you want, but this is what I believe in, because the reason why I created that company is because I wanted to create jobs. So I wanted these women to have a job back. And I wanted for my culture to be known and respected in the world, right? And so that was my solution to my problem. If women are losing their livelihoods, and if a part of my culture is disappearing, this is how I'm going to solve it. I'm going to solve it through entrepreneurship, building a brand, and I'm going to get the Americans to embrace it. That way I can take it back to my own people. So by the time the UNDP did a case study on us, we had put 400 women to work. And by the time, a couple of years later, with 9,000 women. So wow. We had succeeded from that standpoint. So in any case, but in doing that, Nick, I started to see things that had to do with my question. So what if I told you that, we had a sister company in Senegal and a sister company in the US. Sister company in the US, R&D, sales and distribution, marketing, all of that. And sister company in Senegal, was primarily the supply chain management, all of that. And so each one of them has its own entity, and they're linked at the hip with a mother company based in the Cayman Islands back then for multiple reasons. In any case, what if I told you that the Senegalese entity back then took almost 2 years to legally register?
Just to register?
Yeah. Compare that to the US side. We're talking about less than an hour, 20 minutes, depending on how fast you can type or whatever.
Wow.
In the US, couple $100. Over there, a few $1,000s of all the fees, jumping through hoops, only God knows what. In the US, you and I, Nick, want to sign up a contract. Like, I want to hire you to work in my factory and making these beautiful like skincare products. It turns out you have this bizarre, worthless PhD in German that we don't need for you in the lab. But oh well, you're sitting home right now because nobody needs your PhD in German, but I'm seeing something in you, and it's people, you can always train them. So we agree, we're going to work together. In the US, you and I settle on a wage, for you, and on a compensation plan, and you sign, I sign, we put it in the drawers, we're done. In Senegal, you and I have to sign something in free copies. And because I am going to have then now to literally physically take this to the contract that we have in free copies. I'm going to have to literally myself take it to the office, a government office called Inspection du Travail, Labor Inspection Office. There, and the reason why I have to go physically is because you send them an email, good luck with that. It's almost as if they don't know how to open emails. They don't care. So you have to physically go there. And insofar as we put ourselves into a little fisherman's boat, so funny, my brain always is little fisherman's boat. Insofar as we put ourselves into a little rural area in the middle of nowhere, because I'm trying to create jobs in this area so people don't have to leave their communities, it means we're far away from the government centers. And so an hour and a half or so one way and same other way. We leave super early in the morning to be the first ones. You arrive in there, the government official is nowhere to be seen. He's running errands at the bank, personal errands, all types of things. You wait till 11, noon, finally somebody shows up. Or maybe he was with his mistress, who knows. Finally shows up, and you've been waiting, and treats you like crap, like whatever. So, but this guy or this woman gets to decide if you and I can work together.
Yeah. And
also at what compensation. And also, he wants you, Nick, to go and get a health certificate from the doctor to show that you're physically apt to do this job, even if it's a desk job, mind you.
God, kidding.
All of it's nonsense. And then if everything is fine, and if not, we have to go back and forth. So there's this one situation where it took us maybe 3 months before we could have a stamp on that thing. And then back and forth. Can you imagine the time I wasted?
Well, and let me guess, since I work in a legislature, this was all about labor protection laws.
Yeah.
That's always the justification. And it's like, you're looking at this going, this woman is about to not have a job because you're making me go through this bureaucratic nonsense. Yeah. Oh my God.
And that's exactly what it was. So this is why half of African graduates, actually in Africa, it is known that the more degrees you have, and the more you are at a risk of not being able to have a job. Why? Because also they have baked in, based on your level of education, even if it's irrelevant to the job you're going to have, that it puts you on a certain category of compensation. And you see, it's not in line with the market or what the market can bear, or what's going on. So you cannot be competitive, and that's not even adding the import tariffs and things like that. As you know, we're in a globalized world. If people making tires somewhere in Germany don't necessarily have access to the plastic, or the, I don't know how you call
Rubber.
it, the caoutchouc, rubber. Yeah, caoutchouc. So it's rubber in English. So the rubber that they need as a base ingredient, base input, might not be coming from Germany. It comes from another part of the world, right? And a lot of little elements like that. Some things that I need for making my products here are going to come from Senegal, like the hibiscus oil, the baobab oil, all of that, and the shea butter, all of that. I can find it at the quantity and the quality that I need, with the traceability that I need in my country. Great, I do that. But there's many other things that have to come from overseas. But when they come from overseas, some of them 45% tariff, and over 70% tariff, right? And then if you try to find a way to go around it so that you're not rendered non-competitive and de facto, excluded from even trying to do this, because if the numbers don't add up at the end for your customer, there's no point of you getting in the business in the first place. Customer for the same product, same quality, same everything, is not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to compete with an American woman who's gonna sell hers at $4, and mine, because of stupid taxes, in the end, if I want to make it, I have to sell mine for $6. No customer, same quality, same product, is gonna be willing can justify a $2 difference under circumstances like that. So anyway, then it means I have to think about how can I still do what I'm doing. And so, meaning in this case, I had to reach out to the number 2, I think it was number 2 of the customs, go there, again, drive my car, go all the way there and sit down. But now you can say, this is not right, because not everybody can have that type of access, which is true. You should not have to have access, right? To have information or to know what's going on. Go there, this guy's opening like binders after binders after binders, and each sheet of binder has laws and regulations. So basically, when you put them all together, like for labor laws, when you put all these laws together, this is just like in customs alone, you probably have truckloads worth of regulations in here, in this room, that you have to sift through. That's how complicated things are. Same thing with paying your taxes. So paying your taxes is like, forget that the taxes are high, but even if you want to pay them, then you have to think, how do I pay them? Like every month now, they said, okay, it's only every 3 months now. But up till maybe a few months ago, every month, I had to literally go into 3 different government offices to pay payroll-related taxes.
Wow.
Can you imagine? And they don't take, it's just, I think people have no idea what I'm talking about here, because for them, it's just like, huh? Well, and if you're like, huh? I don't blame you.
Well, and let me tell you the other thing that I see a lot, and this is one of the things that it's the demonization of the entrepreneur or the business owner. It's the demonization of them within political culture, because you're right. As you're explaining everything that you're going through, I don't know too many people that wouldn't listen to that and think that is absurd. What idiot came up with those rules? And I want to look back at those people and I want to say the one you voted for, because when they came back and they convinced you to vote for them, they didn't say, I'm going to create this horrible, Byzantine structure of red tape to destroy entrepreneurial opportunity. What they told you was, I'm going to take care of the laborer. I'm going to take care of domestic business against its foreign competition by raising these tariffs. We're going to come up with these regulations in order to protect the environment or whatever it is. And people don't understand that the way that translates into the real world is you not only have to work through this horrible structure in order to get anything done, which, by the way, for a lot of us, it's so horrible to work through that people just give up.
That's right.
You fought through because you not only had a vision for what could happen, but you also had a moral conviction on what you wanted to achieve with this. But so many other people who are looking at this going, look, I had this idea. I wanted to run it as a business. They're not stopping or failing because they don't have customers or because they're not good business owners. They're failing because either A, they can't figure out how to navigate the regulatory environment, or they're so worried about the liability associated with messing up innocently.
That's right.
Messing up on some little regulation, they just stop.
That's right. That's exactly right. And what you described right there, that's exactly what is happening to us. All the people who could build businesses, whether people underground or people from the diaspora or foreigners, nobody. I mean, where you could have 100% people coming, only 1% right now is doing business. But that 1% is not going to get us anywhere. We need a more critical mass than that. But as long as this is the case, we're not going to come. So you see, but this is a problem. So when I saw all of these issues, and I was just like there, I was just comparing because I'm doing business in the US over here and I'm doing business over here. And I'm like, whoa, the discrepancy between the ease of doing business is astounding, isn't it? And eventually I thought to myself at first, I was like, it's because we're poor, but everything is so messed up. And it's because they're rich, but everything is so fluid. But then the minute I would think that, I was like, wait. Well, but didn't we say that you're poor because you have no money? You have no money because you don't have a source of income. Our source of income for most of us is a job. Where do jobs come from? They come from businesses, the private sector. What do businesses need? They need an enabling business environment. Oh, but wait, you just told me this place right there has the worst business environment in the world because all the things you and I talked about, economists call it the business environment. This is the business climate. That's what we mean by business environment, business climate. And another word for it is also the level of economic freedom. So basically, and then as soon as I thought about that, I'm like, whoa. And then I was thinking to myself, okay, is this and then I had to go check it out. Are we just an anecdote to what's going on? And that's when I discovered that economic index after economic index, this is when I started to see the literature from other economists. This is when I started to learn about people like Hayek, about people like Milton Friedman, about, all of these great thinkers who have really put their hands on their finger on it. Hernando de Soto, Peruvian economist. Amazing. All of them describing in such eloquent language, what it is that I, as an African entrepreneur, was experiencing. And it turns out that you have all of these economic indexes that are measuring how hard or easy it is to do business anywhere in the world. And you realize that index after index, Africa, most sub-Saharan African nations, turns out it's harder to do business in them than it is anywhere in Scandinavia. Wow. Most African nations so here was my answer. Africa is the poorest region in the world because it also happens to be the most over-regulated region in the world. This is the region in the world that does not provide a sufficient level of economic freedom to its entrepreneurs so they can enterprise. And as they enterprise, building these businesses, they're creating these jobs. These jobs are providing people with an income. That income is what is supposed to get them out of poverty and into prosperity. They take this income to take care of their families, take care of what they need. And if you have many more people who can achieve that within your country because you have allowed many more companies to create those jobs, then all of a sudden your country is no longer poor because now you have created your critical mass of people are in the middle, they're in the middle class, and no longer where you have this big pyramid of people in the poverty, a few people in the elite, and a tiny middle class in the middle. No, here your middle class is a bigger one. the poor people are more like this, and the elite is more like this. That's what you want to see. And that's what personations are like. And so there you had it. There you had it. I had my answer. So you can see that once you have this answer, you're now starting to realize that, whoa, so now what do we do about this? And so as soon as I understood that, I started now getting involved into, okay, how can we clean up this business environment? And so that's how I got involved into, policy reforms. This is how also I got involved with, an organization like Atlas Network, which is the largest organization of free market think tanks in the world, working with our partners in Africa, where they come with their own problems and also their own solutions to the problems. People in Burundi, some of our partners in Burundi have worked really hard to put property rights for women into the constitutions. Our partners in South Sudan working really hard where, in South Sudan, the property rights for women are in the constitutions, but it's not applied in real life. So how do we correct that? So you see just like amazing stuff. And all of these together, these are all different elements of what we call economic freedom. But Nick, it's going too slow. It is necessary.
Yeah.
That work is necessary, but it's going too slow. It's going too slow because every year we have millions and millions of young Africans who are coming of age to work with not much work. And yeah.
Can I ask you a question on this? Because this is something that I think a lot of people are feeling right now. It's something we talk a lot about on our show, this idea of if you're waiting to change everything through the political process, it's going to be slow, it's going to be painful, and you need to understand that you're dealing with a political process that has its own objectives. This idea, Thomas Sowell does a beautiful job talking about this and explaining that government institutions, government organizations, political structures, they have their own objectives completely separate from what people assume those objectives are. It's like, oh, it's to do what's best for the people. Okay, except that people disagree on that. And these government agencies and bureaucracies, they want to grow. They want bigger budgets. They want more power. Politicians want to get reelected, and they're more apt to do what they think will get them reelected than what might be the most economically sound thing to do. And so I'm really fascinated by your work on this concept of startup cities. And like you said, I always tell people, look, you can't ignore politics because politics isn't going to ignore you. So to the extent that you can be involved, that you can vote for the sort of people that are going to advocate the policies that you want, you can engage in legislative, great, do all of it. But also look for opportunities to where you don't have to operate within that Byzantine regulatory, political, government-run approach. What are the private sector things that you can do? Because I think one of the biggest problems that we have is when you have generations of people that have grown up believing this is just the way it is, and you tell them, look, we've got this new way of doing stuff, or not even new, but just a different way of doing stuff that's going to provide you the sort of prosperity. And if you're telling them about the change, but you're not actually showing them what it could look like, there's a lot of fear associated with giving up what you have, even if it's bad, and taking a risk on something that might be better, but you just don't know. And I feel like the concept you guys are working on with startup cities is a great opportunity to say, look, we're going to prove it works. And then we're going to put the government and the politicians and the bureaucrats in a position to have to actually fight, not just against a concept, but against an idea that has actually worked in real life. So can you tell us a little bit about this project? I know there's some details you can't disclose right now, perfectly understandable, but at least conceptually, can you walk us through what you're working on with this? Because I think this is fascinating.
Yeah, no, thank you. So the best way for people to think about the startup cities is think of next generation special economic zones that have their own law, have their own governance, and also have custom regulatory framework. And this simply when it comes to the business, laws. So by now, I think many people now have understood that in order for these African nation, for any nation to achieve prosperity, you have to unleash your entrepreneurs. The way you unleash your entrepreneurs is by providing them a world-class business environment, which means a very free market environment, right? So where they can really unleash their potential and start and build innovation, all of that good stuff, and create the jobs, and you have all of this cool stuff happening. A lot of these African nations, like we said, don't have that. Now you can't just come in and say, oh, you know, you terrible, terrible. We're going to have to switch the whole country from one day to another to where you are to where you need to be, from where you are to where you need to be. And so the best way to think about startup cities is that what we're saying is, let's say you're in country A. Within country A, find a piece of land the size of a city, ideally, that's rather unoccupied. So you cannot be, accused of misplacing people or expropriating, blah, blah, blah. You find an area that's rather unoccupied. And in a lot of these places, you have that because everybody is packed, like Senegal, a quarter of the population is packed into the capital city of Dakar because that's where everything is, the government offices that the businesses and people need, everything. So you have lots of really empty pockets of land where people deemed there's nothing happening here. We're all gone to these other 1, 2, 3, 4 bigger cities. So you go to a place like that, and there what you do is you work with the government. See, this is not foreigners or weirdos from the country coming and saying, we're putting our stake here, it's ours, but out. This is still a country. You're within a country, and it has its rules, its regulations, everything. And you have to find a way to go from there to where you believe, is going to be a better situation. So you work with the government in terms of, in this place, plot of land. The way to think about it is think about this plot of land as your computer and think about the laws that rule the business on this plot of land as your operating software. And we all know some operating softwares are much better than others. And the truth is, many African nations are running on the worst yesteryear business softwares that exist, period. So, so here what you do is you say on this piece of land, you work with the government to allow you, when it comes to business laws alone, you don't touch anything that's family law, criminal law, immigration law, defense, anything like that, because those are related to sovereignty. You don't touch that, and we don't need to touch that. We are only talking about business laws because we're talking about the business climate we're trying to make better. And so there you get the blank canvas. The country says, because, special economic zones already exist. And in a way, that's kind of what they are. But here you're pushing the envelope much further because you have so many hoops that you have so much leapfrogging that needs to happen. You have to go more than just little increments of, okay, a little bit less taxes. Okay, labor laws. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. It's almost things need to be a little bit more radical than that because you're at a global level and you're competing with the global world. When a company wants to go somewhere, they go to Deloitte & Touche or they go to PwC. They go to these big CPA firms that also will tell them, for what you're doing, it's better for you to go to Germany or go to whatever. None of them is going to tell you to go to Africa because they're going to say, forget it. The regulations and all that is just going to kill you. Don't go there. So we have to think about that. So in this case, the best way for people to understand what we're doing in the startup cities, the ones we're working on, because that's the other thing. People are going to hear startup cities. For some of your listeners that want to learn more, you can also check out Google the word charter cities, because that's the other word that's more used. I use startup cities for a very specific reason. So people can research those words. So in the world of startup cities / charter cities, you're going to see a little bit of everything. Some people are talking about private cities. That is not us. No private cities. These are people who want to go and literally do their own thing. It's almost like a mini country in a country. That's not us. Okay. Mm-hmm. If some countries want to do that and go there, fine. But when I say us, I'm speaking primarily startup cities a la Prospera, meaning the Prospera model, the one that exists in Roatan. It's in Honduras. Roatan is an island of Honduras. So, and then you're going to have some other people who are saying, oh yeah, we're working on startup cities. But there, when you look, it's basically they're doing just little increments from what a special economic zones would be. So those are nowhere where Prospera is in terms of autonomy that can be allocated to the zone, again, when it comes to creating your own business environment and creating something that allows you, like in Honduras. Honduras on its own is, I believe, at number 132, I believe, on the doing business index ranking of the World Bank. Do you know where the ranking of Prospera itself is, that startup city? Number 9. If Prospera was a country, a tiny little country, on the Doing Business Index ranking, it would rate as number 9. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? You see the type of leapfrogging that I'm talking about. But that's only possible with some of the elements I'll tell you about in a minute here. You cannot do that with some of these startup cities that people talk about where they're just doing little increments. Because when you do that, yeah, you might bump up 20, 30 spaces up, which is still a good thing, but you're still not in that top 10 where you become a really serious viable option for any serious viable company in the world looking at where am I going to go and set up my biomedical company or my drone company, all of these really pointy, cutting edge type of industries. They're never going to go to you because you're just whatever. They're looking for, And the reason why they're coming here. So the key elements here. Number 1 is, think about it. In startup cities, you're basically extending choice of law and choice of arbitration to even small companies. The best way for people listening to us to understand this, anybody in the US, creating a corporation of sort, LLC, S Corp, C Corp, whatever, you get to choose where you're going to incorporate your company, right? You can be in Texas, incorporate in Delaware, whatever. That in itself is choice of law. You're choosing which law you're going to subject yourself to, business law you're going to subject yourself to, and which arbitration. You see, even when you write a contract, you get to say, if we have a dispute, we're gonna be judge in the state of X. You see, you're actively practicing choice of law, something that we don't have in our countries. Only multinationals have this. So when you're doing this, you're bringing it to all the companies, small, big, tiny, whatever, everybody. It's great. The next one has to do with, on top of that choice of law, you're adding choice of regulatory system. And so here, the best way to think about it is think about a medical company. I'm sure you heard, if you're a basketball fan as I am, Kobe Bryant at some point had to go to Germany in order to get a knee treatment that he could not get in the US. Think about it. Kobe Bryant, with all of his money, is something he could not get in the US. So why? Because the FDA did not allow for that type of treatment for whatever reason. But Germany, which belonged to the OECD, zone countries, had allowed that. So entrepreneurs there had worked on these type of treatments. And so when someone like Kobe Bryant needed it, he could take himself to Germany to get this treatment that somehow the US did not allow. So in these zones, what we mean by having choice of regulatory system, it means that if you were that same company, let's say your company in the medical world, you get to decide which regulatory body do you want to obey to. Do you want to obey to the FDA, or do you want to obey to the OECD, or do you want to obey to the regulatory that deals with your industry, the Honduran one, or the Senegalese one, or do you want something completely different? And if that's the case, we can design that. You see, that is unique, and that to me is the magic of Prospera. No one else has this. Then also, number 3 that you add on top of those is the fiscal autonomy, so that this zone basically can design a super friendly investment system. And so there, what we do is you get to design your own fiscal system, which is also really great. So you see all the ways in which you're escaping all the bad and strangling regulations of the land. And so,
well, it's amazing because you're again, it's not as if you're saying we're going to set up this zone, and if you want to operate in this zone, you have to do X, Y, or Z. What you're essentially doing is you're allowing for a marketplace, not just with respect to the goods and services which are being created, but also the arbitration mechanisms, the fiscal mechanisms, the financing mechanisms. So you are creating this environment where now people get to, through their own voluntary cooperation and assuming their own risk.
Yes.
They get to indicate to everybody, look, these are the systems that work the best for fostering this kind of environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then going back to this fiscal side, In the case of Honduras, where we have a city there, we turn around and we give the government of Honduras, the central government, 12% of all the taxes that we collect from what's going on inside the city. See? So they're getting money that way too. And there it's divided among the executive, the judicial, the military, and then there's a fourth one, the municipalities as well. And what you're doing by doing that is that you're making sure that the incentives are aligned between the main government and whatever it is that you're doing over there. Your fates are sealed. And any normally constituted government is like, gee, they're making me all of this money that we did not have before. Because that's the other thing too. Most of the money that they're receiving has to do from the land value gains. Because you can imagine how deals like this, it's all about the land value, the delta between the land value from where there was nothing to now you have all of this, right? And we're talking a lot of money, right? And so
let me ask you a question. Forgive me if you're going to get to this, because that was going to be one of the things, is what is the incentive for the government to allow this to take place? Because in some ways, typically the way the governments look at this when they're allocating resources, if I'm going to let you to do this, what's the fiscal impact or the fiscal burden on the government? Do we have to provide you, usually in military security is obvious because you're within their border, but do we got to provide you police? Do we got to provide hospitals? Do we got to provide that infrastructure normally associated with governments, or are you going to provide that yourselves? And to the degree that the community, right, or the city is providing that itself, well, now you've just created an environment where this is a net benefit for the government without having to provide all the services that they usually have to.
You're pretty much helping them to get their cake and eat it too. That's pretty much what you're doing. They're also going to get all the benefits from what's happening, because these places are going to create jobs. These places are going to attract really like cutting edge companies. And then all of that, they're gonna be credited for that, which is going to be election points for them. Remember when you said all they care about is being elected? This could be election points for them. It's also going to be extra money for them because, like I said, 12% of everything happening here is sent straight to the big government. But there we made sure that it's divided among those four that I told you about. So that way there's no way of, like we keep the peace with everybody, and everybody's.
You have advocates now in every branch of the government.
Absolutely, they're watching out for you. Okay, and so on top of that, in our startup cities, we get to administer these laws ourselves. So usually through e-government, and so which means we have to be super efficient. We have to be fair, we have to be fast, and we have to just have a best business environment, because if we don't do all of that, this zone doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, our investment is lost. So you see how the markets keep us in check. And another thing that I want to add in here is the way that we think and look at regulations in startup cities, especially at Prospera. With Prospera, we put a lot of weight on liability insurance. You see, in many countries and in many places, we use regulations in order to supposedly protect public goods and the people, right? Whether it's their health, whatever. Well, you know that, but many people don't know that. Although I think everybody knows that intuitively, because when you hear people complaining about big pharma and all that, all they're complaining about is crony business. They're complaining about the fact that, the state is using its power, and it's, in this case, its power of regulation to actually protect and promote special interest, which oftentimes does not go hand in hand with the interest of us, the people, right? And so in so many places, regulations are taken, are supposedly there to protect public goods and public health and all of that stuff. Well, we argue that liability insurance does a much better job than that. Why? Because I take the case of, for example, the lead situation, the lead that we had in the pipe constructions. Yeah. Well, it turns out all of these, unions in Chicago did not want for people for lead to be let go of. Although by then we knew that lead was causing severe brain damages in kids. But guess what? Oh, no. We don't want to move away from lead because they actually made more money using that. Well, if you had an insurance liability, being the referee between the constructors and the customers, us, the public good, then there was way more incentives to really look at lead for what it was, because if somebody gets something, they get sued. where,
Yeah.
where when you, with the doctrine of sovereign, immunity, you can't sue, or it's very hard to sue. But in this case, who do you deem responsible? This, the liability. So in this case, Prospera, so us, the administrators of a city, we would be the ones that they can sue. A government you cannot sue. So you see how you all of a sudden putting all the checks and balances in the right hands, and there is heat on their bottoms to do the right thing, because there's absolutely nothing protecting you anymore. And so we rely a lot on liability insurance. And also likewise, when you use liability insurance, it's easier to track and get rid faster of bad things. And it's easier and faster to adopt safer things, better things, because it just makes more sense.
Well, and can I, this part, I want to really emphasize this to the audience. This is critical because I hear so many times, well, if the government didn't do this, or the government didn't have this agency, or if the government didn't regulate this, what would happen? It would just be, chaos, and people would be drinking poison. It's like, guys, first of all, there is already a natural incentive for the vast majority of businesses to not poison their own customers, and for consumers to want to be able to get the best value for their money, right? That incentive already works. But you got bad actors. How do you deal with bad actors? Or how do you deal with the unknown? And they're like, you do regulations. To Magatte's point here, if you want a new regulation, it has to go through a long legislative process in most places, where you're still suspect to corruption. You're still suspect to corrupting influences, even if it's not direct corruption. And then if you find out later that you did the wrong thing, well, I hope, great, you can come back next year with a new bill and try again. And then at the end, if that politician or that bureaucracy or whatever votes for a bad regulation, they don't get punished for that. Like, maybe they won't get reelected, but even then, that barely ever happens.
Yeah.
Very few. But if you have a liability insurance, the whole purpose of the company which does the liability insurance is to accurately predict what's going to happen, because ultimately they're on the hook financially when it goes bad. So the natural incentive structure that exists within the relationship that's being described here is far more positive, far more responsive, and far more able to adjust as necessary. And for the people that think, well, what about corruption that can take place within the people providing the liability insurance? Sure, there is no realm for which there is no possibility of corruption. There is no realm for which there is no possibility of malfeasance. The difference is which one has the best incentive structures built into the system, and which one is more likely to adapt. Because let's say you do have a corrupt people providing the liability insurance, or you have a corrupt company providing the analysis, which is informing the liability. Well, then as soon as something bad happens, they either go out of business or a new competition immediately comes in. Right. You don't got to wait for another legislative session in the hope that your lobbyist is more powerful than the other one.
That's right.
And so please understand that what she's describing here works.
Yes. No.
And it's far more responsive.
No, it's that's a lot. That's the other thing I wanted to add. When you said it's far more responsive, but you see, the problem with laws is once a law is in place, it's really hard to get it out. And most importantly, law moves too slow. We see it with technology and everything. The law is a light years behind technology and will continue being that way. AI, we haven't even touched AI, for example. Not that I'm advocating AI being necessarily, regulated or not. But my point is, you can see. And so with stuff like this, you're keeping your finger on the pulse. And another thing here that I wanted to add that I forgot to say, the way we have designed things with Prospera is in a way, it de facto eliminates almost to a point of null the ability for capture the regulatory. You see, like how to, because the FDA, what is the FDA going to do? Or what are the OECDs going to do? Because you get here, you have a choice now. So if FDA is acting up or being messed up or crazy on your industry, you're just like, I'm just not going to subject myself to you. So you see, there's no way of capturing the regulatory, which is what happens pretty much everywhere else. Here, we have to obey to the FDA, whether we like it or not, whether we think it's stupid or not, whether we know that the FDA is killing us or not. We have no choice. But here you have a choice. You have a choice between the FDA, the OECD, which is all the European nations, that are in that, Australia, Japan. OECDs, or you get to say, I'm going to create, we're going to work with you, startup city, or this startup city, to build a custom regulatory framework specifically designed for our industry that is superior from what we have seen. You see now, all of a sudden, no one can capture the regulatory anymore.
Yeah.
And so it sanitizes things. And on top of, so I give you an example. In Honduras, for example, when the startup city there got started, because Honduras, that location happens to have the second largest Great Barrier Reef in the world, second only to the one in Australia. Well, guess what? We put in place very, very protective environmental laws. Now, again, no one forces you to come here. If you want to come, if you were trying to come and do things that are going to pollute or whatever, this is not the place for you. That's it. And that's fine. It's fine. But so we put in place laws that are better protected to the environment, but still very market friendly than even what the government of Honduras on its own would offer. So you start to see, Nick, why these are so amazing and why I'm staking the leapfrogging of Africa on these. Because what you're going to start to see here, especially as America is committing literally, many Western nations are committing suicide, whether it's on their energy policies, subjecting themselves to some of the most ridiculous energy policies we've ever seen, committed literally energy suicide. Whether it's like all of these, ESG rules that they have put on themselves, which again make no sense. I'm the first one to tell you I'm a conscious capitalist, and I do know that ESG is not the way you get to conscious capitalism. Absolutely not. It's just another way of co-opting everything and going for nonsense. So all of these that are happening, the West is literally committing a suicide right now. Well, us, by building these cities in these African countries, we're doing two things for ourselves. Not only the goal and the hope here is to provide all the jobs that our people need, and the diaspora also can come home and finally be able to come home and work from home if they choose to do that, because it's all about choice. People don't have to leave in little fishermen's boats anymore to go find work somewhere else and build a life for themselves. They can do it straight from home, raising their families, getting to see grandma every day. They're able to be there. When my grandma died, I could not even go and visit and be at her funeral because, so when you're an immigrant, life is not as easy. Life is hard. Life is hard. People die behind you. You can't go to the funeral. People are sick behind you. You can't go to their bedside. People get married behind you. You can't celebrate with them. Children are born behind you. You can't go celebrate with them. Sometimes these children are yours and you can't go and celebrate them because you have to wait for a visa to be approved or not. Because if you leave in the between, you lose the whole visa process. Or maybe you were here illegally and you're waiting for, I don't know what, but the minute you come back, you go out, you cannot come back in. So yeah, you go to your mother's funeral or your grandmother's funeral, but you can't come back and keep on feeding that family because your grandma was being fed by you, having his job back home. So these are really hard homes. But all of a sudden now you get to do all of that straight from home, surrounded by your loved ones, surrounded in your community, in your country, living the life at home. It gives me tears because that's what we want. That's what these countries are. It's about liberating us so we can finally achieve this. That's what we're going to be able to achieve for so many African people and some of them who have left. And on top of that, we also will be the ones spearheading and the new stewards of the innovation that the world needs, the innovation that the FDA is denying innovators. The innovation that we're denying ourselves when it comes to energy. We're going to need more energy, more clean energy. Well, I'm talking here about also nuclear, but even that, people are pushing against, and policies are following that. Whereas we're going to be able to have some special regulation that say, here, these things can happen, and so you can imagine the level of innovation. It was. Peter Thiel complaining, we were promised, flying cars instead we got 140 characters. You got 140 characters because the innovation that is needed, what you need to get to flying cars is stifled by these laws and regulations. Well, what happens is in our cities, we're going to say, if you guys are too stupid not to see this, we are smart enough to see it. And please come over here. Please build with us. This is what, for example, the government of Rwanda did when Zipline, this drone company, could not do anything anywhere in the West because the laws and regulation were stacked up against them. And then the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, said, we're too stupid to see this. You come over here. We're open for innovation. And today, it's a multi-billion-dollar company that's now entering the aerospace field. This is what is at stake. So when I'm telling you, we are on our way to leapfrogging, you can't even begin to imagine the world we're going to have ahead of us. Remember, for your audience, Africa has the youngest population in the world. Average age is 19 years old, 19. By 2050, 1 out of every 4 people walking this earth, a quarter of the world population, will be African. And these cities, I've been talking now to 6 nations, going on 8. I have been overwhelmed by the level of interest. So these people are not out to lunch. And also it's because we're doing it in a way where we're not wrecking the boat. We're not telling them change everything. We're going to disrupt everything. No, we go in a rather quiet piece of place and we try this thing. And it's voluntary for people to get in or to get out. And if it works, then you got to try before you buy. If it doesn't work, then we know it didn't work. But there is absolutely nothing for anybody to lose in this situation, except maybe for us, the entrepreneurs doing this. But that's what entrepreneurship is all about. So I want to wake people up. I want to wake people up, especially the people who are in this country right now and thinking that all the fight can only happen in America. I will say to you, be smart, be smart. Yes, keep fighting for America. I believe America deserves, and it deserves to be fought for. We need to keep fighting for America. I believe in America. I love this country. So I will fight for it with everything that I've got. And at the same time, especially if you're serious about that fight, let us diversify our portfolio. Start paying attention to the startup cities. These are amazing places where you can make investments, and your investments are going to have some of the highest returns as they work. So don't concentrate all your fight on the America fight, but also diversify, put some onto these things that are happening. And also what you have to see is these cities are going to start at some point to put pressure under America in the way that you want it to do. And then here in America, maybe they'll start to pay attention when some of the best entrepreneurs start leaving this place to go over there. And we're seeing it already. You have some treatments that are happening in Honduras, for example, that would not have been possible here. And you have some of the most sophisticated patients, I would say. So this is your proof that we're not doing crazy things testing on people. These are among some of the, most wealthy, educated people in the world who get to do studies on everything and say, this treatment is very interesting. I need it for myself. So if those guys did that homework, the little guy knows that, okay, I guess it must be good because they're not stupid and they're definitely not going to poison themselves or kill themselves with weird stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you see my point? So this is what's at stake. And so when that happens, that maybe the American legislators and such are gonna start to think. And sometimes that's really all you need. Competition is good because of that. And so we maybe right now need to create competition for America. That's the only way America is going to get its act together at some point.
Well, I got to tell you, it's always it's always exciting to talk to somebody that is excited about what they're doing. Again, not just for economic reasons, but for moral reasons, for cultural reasons. Listen, real quick, I want to make sure everyone knows the title of your book. So again, the title of the book is The Heart of a Cheetah. And I love the subtitle here. It says, How We Have Been Lied to About African Poverty and What That Means for Human Flourishing. I want to encourage everybody in our audience to check out this book. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes page. Also go to MagatteWade.com. That's MAGATTEWADE.com. Magatte, and any closing thought? I mean, I thought that was, again, I get very excited about people that are not only talking about, again, because I work in politics, so many people are just so obsessed with it as if that's the cure to all that ails them. And when you talk to someone that is an entrepreneur and does have a passion about something, and they've seen failure, they've seen success, and they continue to work incredibly hard for it, it's just really encouraging to see what can be accomplished. And to know that there's things that you can do out there that don't require you going through a politician or bureaucracy. You can find other like-minded people who are passionate about both individual liberty and property rights, but also personal responsibility and recapturing that agency. And so, Magatte, I can't thank you enough. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about where people can find you, either online, on social media, or maybe any upcoming events or anything like that you have coming up?
Yeah, no, social media and everywhere. It's very easy. It's Magatte W, Magatte. You can find me everywhere there. Make sure to follow my Substack as well. And reach out if you're interested in these startup cities. I'm telling you, there's a lot of really cool, exciting things going on. We're going to be having an event here in Austin at the end of April and probably May again. And also we're going to be in San Francisco in late May, probably giving more information on all of this. So, but it's only for, certain people who are really interested in this. Reach out to me and let's have this conversation. But I would just leave you with one thought. Remember, this is a big world. And sometimes when you want to go for a fight, don't forget the flakes. And in this case, Africa is a sort of flake. There's low-hanging fruits out there. Be smart about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And don't be one of those people who will turn around and be like, oh my God, I had no idea. I was here. I told you. Now is the time to join us. We're going to need everybody. So I would just encourage everyone to look into Africa. And there's a lot going on.
Well, again, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Once again, thank you to our audience, and we will see you next episode.